Nightcast. Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth brings you the current news from the world today and how it relates to Bible prophecy. Understanding the end-time events leading to the peaceful world tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth.
Well, good evening, friends, and welcome to this January 30th, 2014 edition of Nightcast. Tonight, our first story, we open up with floods in the UK. It's been the wettest January since records began for many. This year has seen the wettest January in many parts of the UK for more than a century, figures in this report show.
What we needed here was a big pontoon so that people could get out. People are trapped in wheelchairs.
Anne thought the army would be here tonight to help her flooded village. But despite the authorities saying amphibious military vehicles could be on the ground, it turns out they're not coming. Not yet, at least.
It's a farce because there's nobody in control. Nobody is calling the shots. Nobody is heading it up and trying to help us villagers that are, if you like, drowned almost, because that's what it feels like.
The military did turn up today. Commandos were here first thing, deployed overnight to see how they might assist.
Very early days, literally just been on the ground a couple of hours, and we're yet to report back to see what we actually might be asked to do.
But when they did report back, the decision was they weren't needed after all, and that extra help from the fire service would be enough for now. In communities already feeling ignored and misled, it has just added to the sense of exasperation. Many believe the offers of assistance have been more about politicians saving face than actually saving people here.
Well, I suppose it's because we've had so much media coverage this time. That can be the only difference, because we've never had this before. So that's the reason, I'm sure.
Are you a bit cynical about this by any chance? The government insists it is taking the situation on the Somerset levels seriously and says the request for the military came from the county council here. At an emergency meeting in Westminster tonight, the Environment Secretary said the armed services were still available.
The military are on standby, as sadly there is further bad weather coming in and they may be needed for further activities.
Many people in Somerset said calling in the military now was pointless. Water levels have been dropping and the island village of Muchelney is finally reachable in a 4x4.
A few of the residents have said to me today that it's all a little bit late. It's been 4 weeks really that they've been underwater or cut off, and it seems that only now has the panic button been hit.
With the military no longer on the ground, the fire service has been increasing its resources here tonight. This area always floods, but not this badly.
And that was John Kay with that report. Friends, the Met Office of the UK said some parts of England had already seen twice the average rainfall for January by midnight Tuesday, 2 nights ago. And more rain is forecast. And again, that was the military, I think you understood from this report, remains on standby to help flooded areas. And of course, the lady in this video hopes they'll get on out there. That was John Kay with this report. And friends, for our next report, we go to Thailand, Bangkok, which is preparing for a controversial poll. Thailand's government is finalizing preparations for this Sunday's election, or elections, despite main opposition party. Demonstrations have been held in Bangkok for 3 months in a bid to stop the vote. The election is set to be one of the most fraught and troubled elections in the country's history. John Sudworth reports from Bangkok.
The polling stations are being set up. The lists of candidates put on display, but few would envy those whose job it is to oversee this election.
คือทางทหารกับทางสน.ในพื้นที่เราเนี่ย
Right now, the soldiers and the police have prepared their strategies, this election official tells me. The main thing is to make sure those coming to the polls don't bring weapons.
พกอาวุธเป็นหลัก
Despite the political tension, in much of the country life appears normal. But the experience of this Bangkok businesswoman highlights the risk of unrest and violence. Last Sunday, Suvanan Chaipramot went to one of the polling stations open for advance voting, but found her way blocked. For the government's supporters who want this election to take place, she's become a hero. The anti-government protesters trying to stop it accuse her of being a paid activist. I'm just an ordinary woman, she insists. I'm not involved in politics. I just wanted to protect my right to vote. The protesters accuse the government of being corrupt and of buying its way to power. But physically blocking polling stations is not great PR. And they now say they will not stop anyone voting this Sunday. This has all the appearance of normal election preparations. The polling booths going up here, but it is far from normal. In this district and the neighbouring one, 175 soldiers are on standby in case of violence, and no one is in any doubt that whatever happens on Sunday, fighting over the meaning and legitimacy of the result will ensure months of political chaos to follow. This is now about much more than just one election. It is democracy itself that hangs in the balance. John Sudworth, BBC News, Bangkok.
And friends, related to what's happening over in the Middle East with Syria, there is some concern that the delay that is supposed to bring about the clearing out of the chemical weapons from Syria is a little bit more than we should have at this moment in time. And in this next video, Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel will tell us what's going on with that.
Well, the United States is concerned that the Syrian government is behind in delivering these chemical weapons, precursor materials, on time and with the schedule that was agreed to. I spoke with the Russian defense minister and asked the minister to do what he could to influence the Syrian government to comply with the agreement that has been made. We believe that this effort can continue to get back on track, even though we're behind schedule. But the Syrian government has to take responsibility of fulfilling its commitment that has been made.
And friends, the United States is also in the news today with another story, and this one relates to Germany. I see, though, I think we've got some of our video clips out of order, so we'll just go backward in a moment. Angela Merkel says we did part one of this story last night, where Angela Merkel said the U.S. and the UK, the snooping by the U.S. and the UK is sowing distrust as she speaks out in yesterday's news. In the first major speech of Ms. Merkel's third term after winning September's election, Mrs. Merkel said nobody doubted that intelligence agencies had helped to protect the German people from terrorism and crime. But does that make it right for our closest allies, the United States and Britain, to access all imaginable data, arguing that it helps their own security and that of their partners, she said. Can it be right, she's asking, that it's not just about defending against terrorist threats, but also to gain advantage over their allies, for example, in negotiations at G20 summits or UN sessions? You know, friends, it's interesting. I remember a minister, several ministers saying, when somebody points a finger of accusation at you, oftentimes, well, you know, the way that you point your finger, you got three pointing. When you accuse somebody else, you got three fingers pointing back at yourself. So oftentimes the thing that you're thinking and that you bring up and initiate in the way of an accusation against somebody else, not always, of course, but you take a look at the accuser, and many times he's three times as guilty of what he's accusing you of. And so she's asking the question, is this not being done to gain advantage over their allies? And she's taunting herself. I see we got to make some adjustments on these lights or something here. I can see the monitor is knocking it out when I turn. So I guess I should just sit still. But she's taunting herself as a great ally, almost seemingly to forget that Germany signed an unconditional surrender not that long ago in World War II of atrocities, of incredible atrocities. I read many of the papers of the Artukovic trials. I clerked for the judge that handled that trial. Now, after the trial, I clerked for him, and he had to maintain those records for the United States federal government. And he made it my job to organize those, and I had to make copies of them because he was about to retire, and the files he needed to leave in the federal archives, he wanted to have copies of all of it in his library, his personal library, he having been the judge over that trial, which, you know, they're allowed to do. So I had to make all those copies. I had to organize it, categorize everything for him, and I had the opportunity, as I had to categorize things, I had the requirement even to read through those files. And I saw some of the testimony where Germans, just for the fun of it, would cut open a Jewish pregnant woman, mother, expecting mother, kill the baby, and put the baby back inside the mother and sew her back up, now with the dead baby inside the mother. That was just one of many things I read through that would make you have to get up and go outside for some fresh air and take a walk and just say, God, how could such things happen? How could men do such horrible things? But they do, and they did. And the German people, who have it in their blood to want to rule the world. And so, excuse me, Mrs. Merkel, but it's my opinion that if the United States wants to keep who won the war at a cost of sacrifice to many of our forefathers, my father could have and should have, according to the odds of the things he went through, should have been killed in that war. He was saved time and time again, I believe very miraculously, for which I give thanks, because otherwise I wouldn't be here. And many men gave, the point being many men gave their lives in that war at a cost of the German people supporting Nazism and Hitler. And if your victor wants to keep his eye on you for some time thereafter, he has a right to do that, and you're complaining. And if he wants to have an advantage over you, you're fortunate that the United States is not keeping a greater thumb on you than it is. You're fortunate that the United States went to bat for you against your adversary, the Russians. And anyway, the rest of this story, friends, goes, they were upset that the United States might want to take some advantage over them, giving the G20 summit as an example, or UN sessions. She says, our answer can only be no, that cannot be right. She warned that succumbing to the temptation to do everything that is technically doable led to mistrust between allies. However, she emphasized that the transatlantic partnership remains of outstanding importance. Well, yeah, while they're trying to get ahead of the United States with the euro and knock the dollar out of being the reserve currency for the world and knock the dollar out of being the petro currency, they want as much cooperation and advantages from the United States as they can have so they can get that euro in position and get themselves in position over the rest of Europe and eventually be able to tell the United States toodaloo. Only it'll be a lot more than toodaloo, because when you understand biblical prophecy, friends, you know that it's going to be this united Europe, most likely headed by Germany, perhaps not necessarily Mrs. Merkel, but who knows, there's new foreign minister in office now and other new high government positions in office, and they're broadening Germany's military, going abroad now, and Japan had to sign things saying they weren't allowed to have a military and an army, and I think Germany should be held in the same situation. But here we are turning a blind eye to an enemy that, given the opportunity, it will lead World War III, friends. Of course, you got to understand who the United States is, and you got to understand prophecy. Otherwise, you're likely to be naive, and as is very obvious now, we have in leadership in the United States a man who's extremely naive. Just look at what's happening with Iran and where that could possibly go. Iran laughing its head off of us for being so naive. Our former Secretary of State having given warnings that Iran will smile at you, pat you on the back, send you on your way. First chance they get, cut your throat. That's what the former Secretary of State, William Schultz, said. But she conceded that the Allies remain far apart, she being Mrs. Merkel here in her talk against the United States and the UK snooping. She says that she conceded that the Allies remain far apart on what she called ethical question of freedom versus security in state surveillance. State monitoring of phone calls has a particular resonance in Germany. According to this news story, Mrs. Merkel grew up in East Germany where phone tapping was pervasive. And friends, in the news related to the United States, and I do want to share this with you because sometimes some of the things that happen in this world's court system isn't always reflective of what really happened. Now, I happen to believe Miss Meredith Kercher, when she says she did not commit murder in Italy. She was found guilty in Italy today. I'm only going to play this 60-second news story from the BBC on this. It's an interesting recap. It gives the Meredith Kercher murder retrial explained in 60 seconds.
I was already wrongfully imprisoned in that country. And so the risk of that happening again is enough to dissuade me from being present.
And, you know, look at that, those 4 horses on top of that building in Italy. If we colored up each one of them, friends, we could perhaps wind up with something reflective of our 4 horses from Revelation, the 4 horses of the apocalypse. That means the same thing as Revelation. Paint one of those horses white, paint one red, paint one black, paint one pale green, and what do you know, we'd have the 4 seals of the book of Revelation, particularly the 4 seals of Revelation 6. But just a little more on that story related to Miss Kirchner's verdict coming out of Italy today, announcing there will be a new appeal verdict for U.S. citizen Amanda Knox. Oh, I gave you the wrong name, I think. I gave you the name of the victim. But Amanda Knox is also a victim, and her boyfriend, the Italian, who were both accused of murdering British student Meredith Kercher in 2007. They were acquitted of the crime on appeal in 2011 after 4 years in custody, but that ruling was dismissed as flawed last year by Italy's Supreme Court and a new appeal ordered. Both Amanda and her boyfriend maintain their innocence, and we gave you the little background video in 60 seconds. A video, I need to tell you, was produced by Michael Hirsch. Michael does a lot of those 67 summaries, and Michael, thank you very much for those. I appreciate those. Those are a good way to come up to speed quickly on the background on a story. Friends, our next story relates to Israel. Scarlett Johansson quits Oxfam after a SodaStream row. Hollywood actress Scarlett Johansson has stepped down as an Oxfam ambassador after criticism of her support for Israel company SodaStream. The charity said the actress's role was incompatible with being an Oxfam global ambassador. Nick Bryant reports.
You doing it, Scarlett. Carbonated water as you've never seen it before, in the manicured hands of the actress Scarlett Johansson.
Like most actors, my real job is saving the world.
It's her new starring role as the brand ambassador for SodaStream that's embroiled her in the swirl of Middle East politics and brought to an end her other ambassadorship with Oxfam. SodaStream's factory in the occupied West Bank is at the centre of the dispute. It's located in an Israeli settlement, but staffed mainly by Palestinians with few other job opportunities. That's exploitation, according to Oxfam. In accepting her resignation, the charity said that businesses such as SodaStream that operate in settlements further the ongoing poverty and denial of rights of the Palestinian communities that it works to support. But the Israeli company describes its West Bank factory as a model for peace, which promotes coexistence between Palestinians and Israelis.
We will not allow the sacrifice of our people, particularly the Palestinians, the 500 Palestinians that work at Mishor Adumim. We will not sacrifice them for some political cause of some activist group. These people depend on us for their livelihood.
The Hollywood star in Kenya on a trip with a charity she's represented for 8 years.
It's very touching to meet the people in the community and hear their stories.
She said a fundamental difference of opinion was the reason behind the split. Charities increasingly rely on star power to raise awareness and money, but this is an argument where celebrity advocacy clashed with celebrity endorsements. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Washington.
Thank you, Nick Bryant. Friends, I think we'll close tonight with a very light story. Well, and there's a little bit of a pun to that. I didn't intend it. It just came out that way. But it relates to something that I wish we would have more technology developed and explored and made available in the United States at a reasonable cost. There's a story that so much money was given to a friend, a supporter of the president, to go into solar development, but the guy wound up taking the money, spending it, went bankrupt, and all that money, nothing really positive produced out of it. That's a sad, sad shame, because it would be a wonderful thing to take advantage of the power that's right there in the sun and solar panels that could be converted into energy. And over 500,000 homes in the UK have done this. Keith Eggington lives in one of the cluster of homes, all with solar panels generating electricity and solar heaters for their hot water in Rotherham. In this video interview, he explained the benefits of having a solar-powered house to the BBC's John Maguire.
So on the roof of this house in Rotherham, there are two types of solar panel. One heats the water, the other provides electricity. Keith, this is your home.
Right.
Show us mission control.
Right. We've two sections in here. That side is the solar panels on the roof. The system's pressurised with antifreeze, which feeds the water into the coil at the bottom.
And then that's going into the hot water tank.
That's right. The second part of it is your normal central heating.
Yeah.
And of course you generate your hot water through a coil, and you've got your storage as well. But there is a lot of extra sensors fitted to this, and on the roof of the house as well. They're all over, and they're just to gain information over the years to see if it's been a practical project, basically.
And that's going back to Sheffield Hallam University for their analysis.
Yeah, that's going back to Finn at Sheffield University.
In terms of your fuel bills, your heating costs, your hot water bills, etc., etc., what sort of a difference has having these solar panels made to you?
About half.
It's cut them in half.
Cut them in half, yes. Yeah. Our average bill is about £700.
Wow. And even when you've got dull days like the winter it is today,
one compensates the other.
It's still working.
Still working, yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Works well for you. Thank you,
Keith.
It
does. No problem.
Great stuff. At the moment, then, there are in the UK 500,000 buildings with solar panels on their roofs. Government wants to see a lot more, and for people like Keith, obviously it's working extremely well. Cutting his bills, that's the crucial thing. But of course, it's ticking lots of green energy boxes too.
Yeah, I'd like to see a lot of that happening in the United States. Friends, that's it for this Thursday night edition of Nightcast. Thank you for joining me tonight. We take a break now between now and Sunday. We don't do a program on Friday night. We don't do a program on Saturday, on the Sabbath for my church. But we do come back, God willing, and the creek don't rise, Sunday night for our next edition of the current day's news related to the Bible and prophecy. Until next time, your host Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth saying, so long, friends.
You have been watching Nightcast with Stephen Lloyd Gilbreth. Nightcast can be seen Sunday through Thursday nights here on cogtv.org. Tonight's program is also available anytime on demand in the cogtv.org video archive.